My name's Robyrta Felton. I was born on Mornington Island. I still live on Mornington Island. It was announced that Mr. Rudd will say sorry, and both governments agreed. And I sat there and I said, oh, come on. Because we had past experience where governments make us a promise and they don't uphold it. It's forgotten. A lot of people on the island saw the sorry business, and a lot of them asked me, do you think it's true? Because we had so many letdowns by government. So I would say that our people didn't take it as true, My mother and her auntie, and my mother and her 2 children, and her auntie's 2 children, they were sent to Mornington Island, and I was born there in 1931. When I hear stories from some of our women that were taken to Mornington Island when they were little, sometimes it makes you feel like to cry. It still hurts a lot of people. It hurts me because now we're trying to get a family tree together, but we have to go to the Brisbane archives to find. I only recently applied for birth certificate, and they didn't have any records other than a letter from the missionary saying a little girl was born here on such and such a date. I'm 78 this year, and I'll be receiving my birth certificate to enable me to get pension. That's sad. My children went to university and they thought they were Greeks, and another one was a German. And she said, no, my grandmother was a black woman, Australian, indigenous Australian, and my mother, and we come from this tribal group. And she said, the real true friends stayed with her, but others, parted, because she admitted she was Aborigine, descendants of Aboriginal people. Yeah. When we saw the video of Mr. Rudd apologizing to the whole Aboriginal nation, I felt very sorry for those people sitting there, and I could see the tears flowing. And, you see them hugging each other. But it remains the same. The sorry, but our situation remains the same. Actions speak louder than words. So what action is he going to take after his words of sorry?
I was here. Mob FM actually aired live the apology, and we had the community come in, have a listen with us. We had a breakfast and stuff. So there was a lot of people. There was a lot of crying. There was and with that apology, brought up a lot of feelings. And so for me, it was a time to think about my grandmother and her being taken to Palm Island, and some of the family didn't find their mother until she was like 40. So they were like 45, but she knew them instantly when she saw them. And her going away, and the pain of being separated from country, and never being able to really stay over there, and coming back here, and how she just loved our hills. Yeah. She just pined for the country. The pain that I really seen with my auntie was she was taken away from Cloncurry. She said my grandmother was actually cooking them dinner on the Cloncurry River.
Yeah.
And the police turned up and just took them away. And she said she was put into a taxi, and she was 5 years old, and she was crying, and that was the last that she remembers. And all the stuff is transgenerational, so you're always affected by it, even though I'm You know, I'm a great-granddaughter, and you think about all the other people that you know. I was thinking about my grandma, my dad's mum, who worked in the Baduri pub when she was a very young woman, and as I think about what it must have been like for her as well. You know, while it was the apology, I thought it was wonderful, but you just couldn't help cry for your family and for everyone that had been through that.
Our people, they tell stories, but they tell the funny stories and they laugh about it. But beneath that is dreadful stories.
My great-grandfather Sam Watson, he was taken away from his family as well and placed as a station hand, working for from what the stories that I hear is that this man was very cruel to him. Basically lived in slave-like conditions. So I'd heard there was a big build-up to the day of the apology, and everyone was, I think, very keen on hearing what the Prime Minister had to say, and you know, it'd been months in preparation for it. And I come from a family, the Watson family, as he's interviewed Tiger Bales and young Sam Jr. I come from a family of people who were in the land rights. You know, do a lot of the land right marches and a lot of they were activists. Looking back then and hearing the stories from then, they were looking for that apology of what, you know, and they were looking for that recognition in that the government did do this. You know, colonisation did do this to our people. They took away our culture, they took away our language, they tried to assimilate us into their society. And I think for me, hearing that apology, it really is, it doesn't take away that sort of the pain of that, and it doesn't take away, you know, that story of my great-grandfathers. You know, they were taken, and that story will remain of what happened to them, and it will be passed down to generation to generation. And I think what really upset me, I was talking to my mother last night, and she was saying, you know, it affects her still, and it surely affects, you know, generations to come. And if you really think about it, that they couldn't be here to hear that, you know, to hear Prime Minister Rudd say sorry to them. My grandfathers, you know, they passed away at an early age, you know, in their lives, and so they were not, and so they weren't here to experience that release or that freedom, and just to hear that acknowledgement. At the moment, it's really only words. I haven't seen an effect, you know, take place. There's no real, you know, like a new wave of hope that's spreading out through the whole of Australia, and especially amongst the Indigenous communities. And I think for it to take full effect, you know, Prime Minister Rudd has to look at in these Indigenous communities, especially with places like in the Northern Territory where the intervention is taking place, you know, to see that what's been happening there, that it's like going backwards. I think for me, to not just say sorry, but to put words into action, you know, to find a better solution without going back to that time where it was under the Act, you know, and keeping like an eye on the Aboriginal communities. There's got to be a better solution, and I just, you know, feel that it's at this point in time, it's sorry, you know, the word sorry hasn't really taken full effect.